This week, major changes in Canada's energy, lumber, agriculture, and trade policies are reshaping the lives of American workers and families. Could these shifts leave many Americans reconsidering their future in key industries? Canada's largest liquefied natural gas project, LNG Canada, led by Shell and located in Kitimat, British Columbia, began exporting up to 14 million tons of LNG per year as of mid-2025. The majority of these exports are directed to Japan and South Korea, with long-term contracts signed for stable supply chains. As Canada's capacity ramps up, U.S. LNG exports, once dominant from Texas and Louisiana, are facing stiff competition and reduced market share. The U.S. Energy Information Administration has noted early signs of this shift, with American LNG exports to Asia down by over 12% compared to the previous year. This change is deeply felt across southern U.S. ports. LNG terminals in Texas and Louisiana are now reporting declining vessel traffic, with industry reports from the Port of Houston noting a 15% reduction in LNG ship departures in the first half of 2025. As shipping contracts move north, American LNG truck drivers, once in high demand, now face canceled routes and idle trucks. Many drivers in Texas have reported monthly incomes falling by 20 to 25%, with some unable to cover daily living expenses or maintain health benefits. Analysts expect Canada's LNG export volume to grow steadily through 2026, potentially reaching over 18 million tons annually as additional trains come online. If current trends persist, American ports could see further declines in traffic, with projections showing up to 30% of previous export volumes rerouted or lost. This scenario would further pressure U.S. trucking and shipping jobs, driving down wages and limiting local economic activity. Canadian softwood lumber is flooding international markets, especially via the Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement, or CETA, with the EU. In the US, Canada now holds around 30% of the softwood market, valued between $8 billion and $10 billion per year. In response, the US has levied a 14.54% tariff on Canadian lumber imports and is considering an increase to between 27% and 34% in 2025. Despite these tariffs, Canadian lumber continues to undercut U.S. producers on price and availability. The impact on American communities, especially in Oregon and Idaho, is significant. Sawmills have reduced operating shifts and implemented rolling layoffs, forcing many workers onto part-time schedules and reducing their health care coverage. For example, according to local reports in Oregon, at least 600 workers have faced furloughs since early 2025. Rising lumber prices are directly impacting home construction, with the National Association of Home Builders, NAHB, estimating the average cost of a new home has increased by $1,800 in the past year. Due to higher lumber prices, this means American families are now paying more for homes and renovations. Experts forecast the U.S. may further raise tariffs, but unless domestic production increases or supply chains improve, prices will likely continue climbing. Homebuyers and builders should prepare for ongoing volatility through at least the end of 2026, with added risks if Canadian exporters find new ways to bypass tariffs or expand overseas contracts. Canada has aggressively expanded its grain and ethanol exports through recent trade agreements, including the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, CPTPP, and the Singapore-Europe Partnership Agreement, SEPA. In 2025, Canada secured contracts for soybeans, corn, and wheat to the EU and Asian markets, taking advantage of streamlined trade routes. As a result, Canadian ethanol now accounts for over 60% of all ethanol imported into Europe, a significant jump from just 35% 5 years ago. The consequences for U.S. farmers are immediate. In Nebraska and Kansas, growers are slashing prices by up to 15% just to clear out stored grain, as global buyers favor Canadian supplies. Grain silos are full, and many U.S. truckers have seen their work hours reduced as shipments stagnate. According to recent surveys by the American Farm Bureau, over 20% of Midwestern logistics staff have faced reduced hours or layoffs since late 2024. Ethanol plants in Iowa have also responded by cutting back operations, leaving many drivers and bottling workers seeking second jobs or side gigs to make ends meet. Looking ahead, industry analysts predict that unless the U.S. can negotiate new trade deals or increase competitiveness, the trend will persist. Canadian exporters are expected to consolidate their lead, potentially expanding their share of both grain and ethanol markets in Europe and Asia through 2026. This could further depress U.S. farm incomes and limit job opportunities across the Midwest. Canada's growing global reputation is built on transparent supply chains, certified ISO and eco-label standards, and stable, predictable tax policies. Major ports like Vancouver and Halifax operate year-round, providing reliable logistics without unexpected delays. International buyers now see Canada as a safer, more dependable partner, particularly as U.S. policies shift with each new administration. Frequent U.S. policy changes, unpredictable surcharges, and port slowdowns, especially at Los Angeles and New York, have frustrated global buyers and undermined confidence. The effects are being felt across the American workforce. U.S. firms are losing international contracts, leading to reduced hours for workers, lower incomes, and the loss of performance, bonuses, and healthcare benefits. For many families, the financial squeeze means postponing medical treatment, limiting children's extracurricular activities, and struggling to meet basic household expenses. A 2025 report by the Economic Policy Institute estimates that over 70,000 American jobs linked to international supply chains could be at risk if the trend continues. Forecasts suggest that Canada will keep strengthening its position, and more international buyers may choose Canadian suppliers if the U.S. does not stabilize its trade and port policies. American workers and their families could see prolonged job insecurity and increased financial pressure. Analysts agree. These trends are likely to shape American jobs, incomes, and prices for years to come. American families and businesses will need to adapt quickly to secure their financial futures in the face of these changes. Major corporate shakeups and hefty tariffs are rattling U.S. industrial heartlands and consumer prices alike. Will thousands of job cuts and soaring steel prices push American families to the edge of a new economic crisis? General Electric will slash 12,000 jobs in its energy division worldwide. Workers, particularly in the Midwest and Northeast, face sudden layoffs, affecting families and local businesses. Tax revenues shrink, while social support costs rise, straining community services. These cuts hit regions already coping with industrial decline. Families lose income. Fewer local taxes lead to underfunded schools and public services. Communities must rely on unemployment and aid programs, stretching already limited resources. In towns where GE was a cornerstone employer, real estate values are dropping, and small businesses are closing due to reduced foot traffic and consumer spending. Entire local economies face cascading effects from this workforce reduction, with no quick path to recovery. The U.S. doubled steel and aluminum tariffs to 50%, effective June 4th. Domestic aluminum prices jumped by 54% Midwest premium, and hot-rolled coil steel climbed 7.4%. canned food prices may rise 9 to 15%, or by 30 cents per can. Consumers face higher prices for cars, appliances, canned goods, and construction materials. Low and middle-income families will feel the pinch most during grocery shopping and household spending. Communities relying on manufacturing may bar business expansion or relocation due to cost uncertainty. Families planning home repairs or vehicle purchases are now postponing them. Construction jobs are being reevaluated or cut. Small manufacturers warn that profit margins are evaporating, forcing potential layoffs or even closures in already vulnerable rural regions. Tariffs will cost the typical household $3,800 a year. Car prices could increase by $2,000 to $4,000 per vehicle, squeezing middle-class budgets and diverting spending from other essentials. The US ISM manufacturing PMI fell to 48.5 in May, marking a third consecutive month of contraction. Companies like GM delayed investor briefings, and UPS plans to cut 20,000 jobs, citing tariff-driven cost pressures. Hiring freezes and layoffs make job markets unpredictable. Families delaying purchases weaken local economies. Consumer confidence drops, harming small businesses and eroding the social fabric of manufacturing towns. Experts caution that tariffs alone cannot revive U.S. industry. They urge long-term strategies, retraining workers, supporting innovation, and sustainable investment. GE and others are shifting production abroad, seeking stable costs and business climates. When companies leave, towns lose jobs, tax dollars, and identity. Workers without new skills face unemployment. Without a clear industrial roadmap, communities struggle to attract new firms or retrain displaced employees. Investor confidence in U.S. government bonds is slipping as debt hits new highs and fiscal challenges mount. What changes might ordinary Americans face as financial risks grow? On June 12, 2025, the U.S. Treasury is set to issue $22 billion in 30-year bonds. But global investor faith is weakening. The 30-year Treasury yield recently surged to 5.15%, the highest since 2007. Between November and February, foreign central banks sold a net $19.6 billion in long-term treasuries and shifted into short-term T-bills, signaling rising caution. By January 2025, foreign holdings in U.S. treasuries stood at $8.526 trillion, with Japan holding $1.079 trillion and China $760.8 billion, according to Bloomberg. As trust in U.S. bonds declines, borrowing costs rise. Americans will face higher interest rates on mortgages, car loans, and credit cards, squeezing household budgets and making it harder for families to buy homes or cars. Higher rates also slow spending and threaten job growth, putting pressure on both businesses and workers nationwide. Moody's has cut its outlook on U.S. government credit due to surging debt, now over $36.2 trillion as of December 2024. The annual interest cost is expected to top $1.13 trillion by 2026, overtaking national defense spending. Moody's warns, the U.S. faces rising fiscal and political risks. If deficits continue to grow, if interest payments overtake defense, funding for programs like Social Security, Medicare, and public education may be cut. This could reduce healthcare access, shrink safety nets, and make it harder for families to get support or send children to college. Such cuts would especially strain the middle class, increasing financial stress and making the future more uncertain for millions. While new retaliatory tax proposals, such as Section 8.99, have made headlines, details remain unconfirmed and are under debate in Washington. Financial experts warn any sharp tax hike on foreign investors could trigger capital flight from the U.S. bond market. right as the country faces massive refinancing needs. If foreign capital pulls out, the U.S. must pay more to borrow. This means even higher interest rates for families and businesses. Rising borrowing costs could push up prices for goods and services, while making loans harder to obtain. In turn, job cuts and spending slowdowns may ripple through both public and private sectors. Putting even more pressure on American households, the Consumer Price Index rose 0.3% in May, lifting annual inflation to 3.6%. Trump's proposed $250 billion in tariffs on Chinese goods may drive inflation higher. Each 1% increase in tariffs could push core inflation up by 0.4 percentage points, according to Bloomberg Economics. Stubborn inflation and slow growth point to a possible stagflation scenario, where rising prices erode investment returns and investor confidence falters. Stagflation means everyday essentials, like food, fuel, and services, cost more. But wages don't keep up. Millions could see their paychecks stretched thinner, making it tougher to pay bills and cover basic needs. The risk of layoffs and job insecurity would rise, leaving many families facing harder choices and a tougher financial future.